Hey, everybody. This is going to be a different kind of hour rather than some of these panels in other organizations that are kind of dry and academic. We're going to have some fun this afternoon. We have a pair of prolific writers, directors, and producers. Julia Hart, over there.
Hi.
And Jordan Horowitz, over there.
Hi.
Now, because you are with the Writers Guild Foundation, I know all of you did your homework on their backstory and their IMDb. And if you didn't, do you really want to be in this business? So I know you did your homework. So I'm going to spend about 20 minutes talking to them about their experience giving notes and getting notes. And then you'll have an opportunity to pitch them a 2-minute version of what you're working on. And then you'll get an experience of what a pro has to deal with in thinking on your feet and executing notes on the fly. Now, this is a somewhat artificial version of what happens in the real world, but thinking on a dime and going in a different direction with no notice is part and parcel to being a pro in this business. So with that, my first question for both of you is, when you're starting out, you don't get a chance to get notes from people like you. So how do you find someone who knows how to give notes on a script?
Well, sorry, but I actually did, because when I started out, I was his wife. So I just got very lucky because I did get notes from someone like him. So I'm actually not the right person to answer that question, but maybe you can answer it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I always say to people starting out that you just need to find your group of people. You need to find the people that are kind of after, you need to find your peers, you need to find the people that are after the same thing that you're after. I mean, for me, I went to school at Northwestern, go Cats. I was in the theater program, but there was a lot of overlap with the film program, and there were a lot of writers and directors, and I was a producer, I was also an actor at times. But coming out of school, there was a group of us that were all working together and all giving each other feedback on each other's work. So, that was really the starting point for us to be just kind of feeding each other and propping each other up. And then, listen, there are always any number of places you can submit your work to, online competitions, online groups of people that give feedback. Blacklist, Frank Leonard's company gives feedback to, just about anybody that signs up for that site. So, and we'll give you feedback from professional readers and people who are used to doing this work. So, there are professional resources for new and amateur screenwriters, but also just going about finding, your group of people, your group of artists that support your work. That's always my biggest piece of advice to people that are just starting out.
That's a much better answer than mine.
Marry a producer.
Marry a good producer.
Best advice you can get.
So what I'm hearing you saying is network and put a ring on it. Okay, that's very good, everybody. My second question is, how do you know what's a good note? And what I mean by that is, if someone gives you a note that's an outlier from all the others, should you discard that, or is that something you should pay attention to?
I actually think sometimes that ends up being the most important note, because the notes that are all incongruous with each other, you kind of end up doing all together. But sometimes it's a note that feels like it's a divergence that's actually the answer to all those other notes, or the real problem that they're trying to service with those other notes that are all talking to each other. So I actually feel like there's a reason all of those notes end up on the page, and you sometimes have to do the work of figuring that out, because sometimes the person giving you notes doesn't even really know why they're giving you those notes. It's just like the beginning of a feeling of something that isn't working, and you have to do the work to uncover what the real issue is.
Those are always my favorite notes, to be honest, are the ones that just say, this doesn't, I'm not staying with this at this point. I don't entirely know why, but there's something bumping for me here. I think notes that are prescriptive and say you should do this at this point, occasionally are right, occasionally are helpful. It depends on who's giving it and why they're giving it. But In general, I prefer notes that are much more questioning and more about whatever the reader or viewer's response was, and then leaves it to you to unpack that and figure out how to apply that to your work, which I think is the more 35,000 foot view thing I'm trying to say is I like notes that that recognize the thing you're trying to do on its terms, not on the terms of the giver of the note. I think people, good note givers, good collaborators are signing up for the work that you're doing, not the work that they would have done if they were you. It's a tough thing to unpack sometimes, but it is a really crucial one.
If I'm hearing you right, you're saying a note would be, if I wrote this script, this is what I would do compared to what you're trying to do is this, maybe this can help. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you want to write a different script, that's like, if a note giver wants to write a different script, that's fine, but then they should go write that script. Don't try to make my script into the story you want to tell. You know, give notes to my story on the terms of my story that make the story that I'm telling better, not the story that you would have wanted to tell. It's true of criticism, it's true of notes, it's true of lots of different things. I think, you know, accepting the work on its terms is sort of the table stakes for me, of someone criticizing or giving, you know, creative criticism or good criticism or good notes to that work.
Sure. There's a challenge, especially in 2020 and our cultural moment. Have you had the experience of getting a note from someone who's not in your experience? In other words, can a white person give a note on a Black themed project? Can a man give a note on a female-driven comedy?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think it's why it's so important that studios continue to hire executives that represent the diverse society in the movies that they're now making. Like, if we're going to start having more diverse stories and more diverse storytellers, we also need more diverse executives and producers, because I think that having commentary from a different race or from a different gender is important and interesting, because ultimately we want our stories to speak to a wide audience. But I think at the end of the day, it's incredibly important to also have whatever voice is being portrayed be criticized or noted from a similar perspective.
Yeah, I'd say both are very, I mean, listen, you seeing things from a new perspective, I sort of go back to the answer I gave to the last question. Like, any individual from any walk of life can accept the story I'm trying to tell on its terms, but see it from their perspective. And I think that is crucially important in the notes process, is, you know, getting a wide range of perspectives, man, woman, white, Black, Asian, whatever it is. Again, any walk of life. I think as long as the note giver is giving the note based on the terms of the story as it's told, then I appreciate that alternate perspective, and usually it helps strengthen the work.
Well, and also with the understanding, like, if you are a white man giving notes to a Black female writer, like, you better have some awareness about what that means and some perspective about what that means. I think that's really important. Like, you know, you're in the midst of doing that right now and brought on a Black female producing partner to that project, because you have that type of awareness of your race and gender that not all people in your position have. For sure. I think is important for them to get.
Yes, I think a white man giving a note to a Black woman saying, is this really what her experience would be like, is probably not the best note for him. But like, and I mean, you'd be surprised how often it happens. But yeah, I mean, just having, again, as long as the person giving the notes has an awareness of their own experience
and their own race and their own gender
and like who they are, and then has an awareness of the story that you're trying to tell, then absolutely. But, you know, if it's somebody trying to co-opt somebody else's story into their own experience, then no, that note probably
isn't going to go over so well.
Isn't gonna incorporate itself too well into the story.
Thank you for that. Now, let's jump ahead. Let's say all of our writers who are listening are now in the real world or in your position, and now they're getting notes from a network or a studio. What is that process like? How do you get notes? Are they written? Is it a conference call? Is it a meeting? Is it a lunch?
So, well, I guess now it's a Zoom,
It's a Zoom.
or a Chime if you're working with
Everything's a
Amazon.
Zoom.
But normally it's a phone call or an in-person meeting or
Zoom.
a Zoom. Yeah. And it's usually a conversation with headlines. And then ultimately you usually get a follow-up, a whole written up document that has like headlines, which means like the bigger picture ideas of what's working and what's not working. And then you get a series of page notes where it's like, you know, page 15, the line that Angela says to her mom isn't ringing true. Can we do better? You know, just like specific things to look at and work on. And if they're really great in the page notes, they'll also be like, oh my God, this is my favorite scene on page 18 and 19. You know, it's not just things to change. It's also things that are working, because that's so important for writers and our self-esteem to also be hearing about the positive stuff and what's working. And then, you know, once we read through the notes document, sometimes we do a follow-up call if there were any questions about the specifics, or if we have a solution that we want to pitch before we write it, just in case it might not be the direction they want it to go in. So sometimes that follow-up phone call will be, hey, so to solve the end of the second act issue, how about this? And you pitch them something, and you kind of go from there. And then you dig back into the new draft of the script with the notes document. And it's interesting too, because like, I feel like I've worked with enough different financiers and studios at this point. Like those documents are by and large structurally the same, no matter where.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, when I came up, I learned how to write notes documents much in that style.
And everybody writes them differently, but like generally,
yeah, but generally it's like a paragraph or two about like, thanks for this and this, and we're really excited about that, and we can't wait till this, and you know, with that being said, here are our thoughts and headlines and and then, you know, page notes. That tends to be, which is always a reflection of the conversation that you've, you know, sort of had. Either you know, you have it and then you leave, and by the time you walk out the door, they're in your inbox, or you know, or a week later, you know, after they've incorporated whatever you've discussed in that meeting back into their document. So it's some version of that.
What should the writer's attitude be in that notes phone call or in that Zoom? Is it, okay, I'll do everything, or do you put up your dukes? How do you, what's your vibe?
It's funny because I feel like before I was actually in the industry and in the process myself, there was this, I don't know, implication that like you had to fight notes, or notes were like something to work against. And I actually think that's a mistake. I think if you're in business with the right people, as Jordan said, like hopefully the notes you're getting are in service of the project. And, you know, we start from a place of collaboration as writing partners. And so collaboration is king in our work. And so we feel really excited when we're working with executives who are collaborative in the notes, and the notes are really about making the project better and moving towards hopefully a green light. I feel like we've been very lucky that most of the notes we've gotten on our projects over the years are very inspiring. Like there's never been a like, whoa, out of left field. But I think that starts with who you are making your script with ultimately. You know, are you making it with people who want to make the same movie that you want to make? But I think you certainly don't just do every note because it's given to you. I think you have to believe in it and understand it. And we'll fight for stuff. We'll be like, we don't like that or agree with that. And then we'll have a conversation about why. And there have been times where like, man, on our Disney movie, I was so sure the ending had to be X. And I was like ready to fight for it. And they like kept pushing back on it, and they were right. And he came up with the ending, and they loved it and I loved it. And so it's funny, even sometimes when you think you're like fighting for something, like you still might be wrong and the studio might be right. Like just because they're the studio and you're the writer, it doesn't mean that like you're the one who like,
or you both might be wrong and somebody else might be right. I just to answer that question also in a bit, put a bit more of a fine point on it. I think one thing that is actually really important.
Are you rewriting me?
No, I'm not. It's just something you didn't say specifically, and I want to make sure I say it, which is on that first call when you get the notes or meeting or Zoom or whatever it is, that's actually not the place to push back in general. That is the place for the studio to give you their thoughts. And for me, the posture of just kind of receiving and not necessarily commenting one way or another, unless you're inspired to say, wow, that's a great note, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's a great thing to say, because that allows them to hear that you're hearing their notes. But if there's something that you're not sure about, even if there's something that you're really against, that is not the place to air that grievance right away.
Why is that?
Because there's a suggestion that you're not really hearing what they're saying. Or
that you haven't
just thought about it. Yeah, exactly. Just take the time to think about it. And if as you're digesting all the rest of the notes, that's still popping out to you, either just don't do that note and do the rest of the notes and hope they're happy that you did everything but that note, or, call them back a week later and have a conversation with your executive or the financier, or whomever it is, or talk to your producer and have your producer do it. That, to me, that call is the time for them, right?
To share their voice.
To share their voice.
Like, you've said your piece with your draft, and
yeah.
now that call is their turn to say their piece.
Yeah. And then your response is the next draft, you know? So it's really, I think it's important to respect that process. Otherwise you're denying them, be it your producer, your financier, the studio, whomever it is, the ability to have ownership over the project, which is at the end of the day, the thing that you want in order to move your project from a script to a movie, a TV show, whatever it is you're aiming to make.
Thank you for that. That's a fantastic answer. How do you push back or fight for a note without being that guy or that girl?
I think that you can't answer that in a vacuum, because there is no answer. I think it takes time to develop a posture of collaboration, which I think is incredibly important. And I think it's something that we, as Julia said, like, we start from a place of collaboration. We write together and we work together, but we're not the type of people that share one brain. We have very different skill sets and very different opinions about lots of different things. And we always start from a place of collaboration, and always start from this idea of, like, best idea wins, or, how can we use this to inspire us to find a third option that is better than, what they were proposing, better than what we put on the page. And it's something no one thought of that satisfies everything. And it's, starting from that posture and always coming to the table with the idea of collaboration in mind. Just eventually you can build up the currency to have those conversations, because if your partners trust that you're a collaborative partner, and that you are respectful of their opinions on the project, then you can then also ask them to be respectful of yours. Which is why, again, going back to that last answer, if you immediately push back on things, they're just going to think that you're not listening and you don't care. You don't care about their opinion. You don't value the relationship you have with them. I
think there's a misconception that, like, somehow executives and producers aren't artists. Like, they're artists too. Like, some of the best lines I keep talking about our Disney movie, but, like, some of the best lines of dialogue in our Disney movie were literally written by the executives. They were pitching, doing it badly, but, like, what about this line? And I was like, that's a great line. Like, I want to put that in the script. So they're artists too, and they like being complimented too, and they like being heard too. And this idea that it's like us versus them, there are situations where that can happen.
Yeah.
And that's, where the WGA is very important and protects writers. And, I've been in those situations with financiers where, like, I'm so grateful that the WGA has my back and I can't be forced to do certain things because there are rules and laws in place. But, hopefully, I've only found myself in that situation like one time. For the most part, it can be a very collaborative process if you come to it with the spirit of collaboration and not with an us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
I have a lot more questions for you, but I want to save those questions for the audience and let them do that in Q&A. My last question I got a lot for you, but the last right now is, in Stargirl, what was the most useful note that made you go, aha?
Oh, there's so many.
Oh God, I wish I could come up with, because the thing about Disney that was such a wonderful surprise was how brilliant their notes were, and how like genuinely, because you think of like Disney as like this big studio, like it's just a bunch of really brilliant artists who found themselves as executives and
who also know their audience
incredibly
well.
But like honestly, they just their notes are the best. Their notes are ideas, and their notes are inspiring. Like I honestly think the one about the ending was the best one that they gave.
And they pushed very hard.
And it's funny because it was the one that I thought was the worst note, but it turned out to be the best note. So that's why I said when you brought up the thing about the outlier note, it's like sometimes that's the key. And the ending that they wanted to do instead was like made the movie a million times better. But I think that was like the biggest note.
And then the note, and then
note.
And then I mean, just talk about Under Woman too, like and Amazon, which was a completely different experience, but like, you know, their notes were also like wonderfully idea based, and I think the best note we got from them was like, what was that thing about love?
Well, it was like, the first notes document we got. The headline was, what role does love play in your life, and what does it mean to have real love? Like that's what they wanted the movie to answer, and we were just like, this is coming from a major studio. How cool is that? Like how lucky are we that our job today is to discover the meaning of love in a screenplay?
But again, it's just like these notes that are
inspiring,
that are seeking and want to inspire, and are accepting the work on its terms and saying, how can we dig deeper into the work as it exists, not how can we change this thing to make it some other thing, you know? And that tends to be, as a producer, like the thing I'm always looking out for at every level, which is, and again, this is when I have my producer hat on, not my writer hat, but you know, I sometimes wear both of them, is everybody making the same project, be it television, be it feature, be it whatever, like interrogating what the work is and what is on the page is something that I do very often, and then often put that to any partners that come into the world with us, is making sure that everybody is making the same thing. There are different roads to what that means, but everybody needs to be on the same page in terms of what the story is that you're telling and why you're telling it. Because inevitably, if it doesn't happen right away, at some point, there's going to be some kind of blow up. Somebody's going to use the preview screening to throw it back in your face and be like, see, we should have made this other version of the movie like I wanted to. And it's going to mess things up. Everybody always needs to be making the same movie, making the same television show, telling that story. Different paths to that, but the core of it is really the same.
Thank you. It sounds like you've been blessed with great executives. So good on you.
We really have.
We have, for sure. I mean, for sure we have.
We've also had the bad experiences too.
Oh yeah.
For the most part, it's been.
But
definitely at the studio level, we've had some really wonderful executives and only great experiences. Me, just as, you know, I'll say the same thing for me just as a producer too. Certainly in our work together we have, but also the stuff that we haven't done together that I've done as a producer at the studio level, it's always been pretty good.
Thank you. Now let's have some fun. We're going to call up 4 writers who have 2-minute pitches for the 2 of you. And we're going to be very severe on the time because time is precious today. And then those of you who are playing are going to get phenomenal feedback from these 2 writer, producer, directors. And they may or may not give you a studio network spin. No. And let's just see how well you can bat the ball back, okay? So let's bring up our first writer.
All right, hi there. I'm a little hopped up on oatmeal topped with honey. Nice to see you all. I am a queer kid, and I was raised on the queerest things that were available as a kid in Florida. Disney Channel original movies and the Greek mythology. And then I'm also inspired by my sister. My sister loves to crochet things. That is a full bedspread that she crocheted that has like Pokemon inspired things on them.
That's amazing.
So cool. She is a person who focuses so much on her art, focuses on making her life so perfect, she can't find herself a partner. And inspired by the Greek mythology, I love Pygmalion and Galatea. So I love a rom-com like Tyra Banks's Life Size, where a lonely female crocheter, crochets a life-size man, and he comes to life. And she realizes that her family is directly descended from Galatea and Pygmalion, and all the women in her family can use art to bring people to life, to bring the perfect partner to life. And she thinks that, her family thinks that that's the only way that they can find true love. So it's really about, do you create your partner? Do you find your partner? How do you look for love in this modern age?
Okay, thank you.
It's great.
Are we supposed to respond right away?
Yes.
I want to see that movie tomorrow. That's that's not helpful at all, but like, Tyler, I just like, that's so incredible. I am also a big Greek mythology nerd. I wish I could crochet. But I want to know like what ends up happening. Like I really want to know like what the answers to those questions are. And also like, is there someone, well, maybe I should just ask, unless you have something actually productive to say. Like, have you written it all out or thought it all out through like what ends up happening to her in the end? Can I?
Yeah.
I like want to know.
So I think you get a lot of fun and humor from this character who doesn't know anything, this man that she made up, and she like he doesn't know how to handle himself around her apartment, so she has to bring him to work. He meets one of her work friends, and while she's like, okay, I guess I have to turn this guy into my dream boy, he actually gets a crush on one of her work friends, one of her best friends. And at the same time, there is, the guy at work, Jeremy Jordan in Supergirl, where he's just like, oh, you found a new man. Oh, you found a man. That's not me. Oh, no.
I have an aesthetics question.
Yeah.
I love that. I was wondering if there was a male character in her life who's been there all along, and it's like you don't have to create the perfect person. You just have to look right in front of the imperfect person is really what's best for you. I love that. But,
I do have an aesthetics question because she crochets, creates these people out of art. From an aesthetics point of view, like, is the man she crochets created and then looks like a real man, or does he look like a crocheted man who has come to life? Like, is it a Michel Gondry movie, or is it's like a traditional rom-com? Because I think both have a lot of value. The crazy person in me wants it to be a Michel Gondry movie it's just like a stop motion crocheted human, but
everyone treats like a real
person, because to me the aesthetics and like the cinema of that is really interesting. But
yeah, you definitely are thinking about like the big budget, like let's just stop motion him.
But that's actually in a way that's the indie version of it. But keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I originally imagined it. He's an actor. He can get caught on something and you'll see like the yarn trailing from him around the office, like, some fun set pieces. And then of course she has her family. I think about a crazy aunt who makes things out of clay and just gets bored of one and just takes a hammer to them and just like, nope, I gotta make one. This week I'm with a girl, this way, whatever. I can't decide. And
I love this history of all of these female artists.
And it's
it's so cool.
And it's the discovery of this history, right? Like it's she didn't know about this.
Yeah.
Right.
Her mother did not make a man and just had a husband who left. So that also makes her think that the family curse is true.
Or like she was trying to break the cycle. Right.
Hey, Jordan and Julia, do you have a twist for him so that we can send him off and have him think?
The twist is that it's great and I want to watch it. But I also just wanted to say a recommendation. This isn't a twist and I apologize, Larry. I feel like I'm telling you. Is have you written, and if not, you should, like a Bible of their history?
I've not written a Bible. I have a treatment of it.
I'm sure the treatment is great, but it might be cool to also like actually just sit down and like write the family lineage out just for your own sake, like it's fun to have that as you're writing the script to draw from, that you've already like, it's sort of like a toolbox you can just like pull stuff from.
I'm like trying to
think of a twist. I mean, the thing is, it's kind of already a twist.
Tyler, Tyler, you got the best feedback. Your pitch was so good, they don't want to change it.
Well, I think more than anything, like,
you guys.
well, I think what's so good about this particular thing, right, is that like it's very clear what the world is that you want to establish, right? Like you have this very clear sort of big concept in the present, but then that opens up into a much bigger world behind it, right? So the note that I would give you, and again, I say this without having read the script, with only having heard the elevator pitch in it, is like, how do you go deeper with that? How can you push even further? Maybe you already have. Again, I haven't read the script. I don't know anything about it other than what you said, but from concept alone, right? You sort of check the two big boxes, which is this a good sort of present day, like in the moment of the story happening, is there a big concept there? And then also, does it open up to a bigger world behind it so that we can kind of dig into that? And it has both of those things. So, I'm sure that once you unpack some of that, questions will come up and notes will be given. But I think, again, with this 2-minute sort of pitch version of it, like you're checking the right boxes.
And he's already twisted it too by flipping Pygmalion and Galatea. So our work here is done.
I don't entirely know what that is.
Well, it's the man creating the woman, and he's made
okay.
the man.
She's more of the Greek
It's
myth.
creepy if men make women, and I've always been creeped out by Pygmalion and Galatea in the first place.
She'll agree, yeah.
Tyler, go for
I mean,
it.
I do.
Tyler, it's awesome. Thank you for sharing with us. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Tyler, you don't need a part 2, so go off and write.
So when he said pitch at the beginning, he didn't really specify feature or TV, so mine is TV. I hope that's okay.
All good.
He did it. Okay. So here's me. I volunteer part-time as a campus minister to UCLA, and I often find a lot of the kids that I interact with there find the Bible to be very crazy, like confusing, a lot of list of rules, which is pretty common, and I can acknowledge that is a thing. But for me, I've always interpreted to be like grounded, real, relevant, actually like extremely hilarious, which is uncommon. So I thought, what if I took my existing interpretations and understandings and grounded them in modern day stories that are character driven, heartfelt, and extremely genuine. So my project is called Parable. It's a standalone episodic anthology in the vein of Black Mirror with the tone of This Is Us. And each story is a modern day retelling of a biblical parable with a redemptive arc as various characters go through specific hardships that are entrenched in modern day issues such as the prison system, parenting, first love, racial disharmony, and even app-based dating. So while the location and settings varies each episode, the world is very much that of interconnected families and friendships. And my pilot is about a recently released convict who is trying to reclaim her role as a mother to the son that she gave up when she was incarcerated. And it's based on the prodigal son. So that is my pitch.
Larry, are you cheating? Are these all professional writers and projects that are already set up? Like, what is this?
I got to tell you, that's pretty damn good.
That's so good. I feel like we've been set up. Tiffany, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Like, you just brought tears to my eyes over Zoom. That's so exquisite, and it makes me feel like, why it's the best ideas to me are always the ones where the first thought in my head is, why has no one done that yet? That's like the best compliment I can give.
The only thing I would say from a practical standpoint, just from my producer hat on, anthologies are tough.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I have no base issues with the pitch or with the way you told it. I think it's beautiful and meaningful and
relevant
and the world as it is today.
Meaningful.
Like the Lord knows we need like a revitalization of faith, right? Like there's no question about that. But I think it's hard to sell an anthology off a pilot because you're not really establishing anything from that pilot, because the pilot is a self-contained arc, right? Like, and you can say, oh yeah, like all of them will be that way, but there's no real no real sort of like, okay, I'm going to set off and here's this big world that I'm going to explore and here are these characters. It's like, okay, this is a good standalone script, but how do I keep this going? How do I keep this moving?
Well, have you in regards to that, like, have you thought about them? Because you said this is us, and I wonder if part of what you mean by that, not just in terms of like tone and contemporariness, but also like, are these worlds and characters going to intersect and show up in each other's stories? Like, is it like completely self-contained worlds and locations, or is it more of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
there's something
crossover-y kind of.
Yeah, that's a note actually that I got from a writer friend of mine who's a working writer, that there needs to be some kind of, it's like a D story or a C story that connects the thread. And my best working wrapping idea is that we have a main character that is kind of like doing a podcast, and her life is like intersecting with these stories. And she's kind of a skeptic, and as she's kind of going through these different moments in her life that relate to different things, these stories kind of retell them. So she has her own arc, so that way you have a character you're kind of staying with, who's really acting as the audience because it's kind of that same perspective, but then you really have like the meat of the story is kind of distinct with its own characters.
Right. I mean, the thing with
or have you thought about your experience as being that character? That might be interesting too. Did you say you were a youth minister at UCLA?
Yeah, at UCLA, yeah.
There's something interesting. Like, I thought that was going to be what your show was about when you were first starting to talk, and I was like, oh, that's really fascinating too.
The thing to also think about when doing a sort of a character that connects all the threads is that needs to also have, it can't just be a C or D storyline. That in and of itself needs to have like a very rich arc over the course of series as well. And so like it needs to intersect with, and those individual stories in each episode need to somehow be commenting on or motivating stuff in the present day sort of like story that's interacting it. And it's a tough thing to accomplish. You know, it's not ideal. Like, I would rather just see it as a series, as what you said, as a series of standalones.
Stephanie, may I give you a twist?
Yes, please.
Larry's here for the twist.
Go ahead, hit me.
Oprah heard about this pitch. She loves the idea. You had a meeting at OWN, and they said, we would love to make this, but not as an anthology. Repitch it as a series.
Okay.
No, not now. But I'm going to give you 10 minutes to think about it. We're going to come back to you.
Okay.
But Stephanie, seriously, it's gorgeous,
it's
and I want to watch it, and it's so cool. And I love, we always talk about how the best works of art are fresh and new, but also familiar. And like, what better way to do that than a reinterpretation of the Bible for today's young audience? So anyway, thank you.
I love it too, but we'll work on the twist.
We'll work on the twist and come back to me in 10 minutes. Feel free. Anyone feel free to
Oprah's waiting.
Oprah's waiting. She doesn't have a lot of time.
Okay.
All right, who's up next?
I think that's me. Hi, I'm Alicia Brooks, and so I grew up in a big family. I had 5 brothers. I still have 5 brothers, 1 sister, and I feel like, you know, I didn't have a great relationship with my mom. It was more geared towards my dad, and of course all my brothers. So a lot of male influence. So I do write a lot of stories that are have the daughter try to reconnect or have a good relationship with their mom. And I'm influenced by writers from the classics, and then directors like Spielberg and Ingmar Bergman. But I came up with a story where a 17-year-old girl develops ESP after her mom gets put into a coma by a mugger. And then she ventures through like the pits of gang territory and slums in New York to find him and bring him to justice. And I think this came from an idea that I would like to have a kind of a superpower. I don't know if I want to have ESP. I mean, you know, in my dreams I'm flying, but I just felt like, you know, if somebody could make that connection. If somebody could do that, could have ESP and in their life use it to influence, to help people, I mean, what would their life look like? Who would they help? What would their story be? And that's how I came up with that script. It's a feature.
That's awesome. My first question is, so you've already written the script.
Yes.
Does it talk about where the gift came from, or is that always a mystery?
It's always a mystery.
So what ultimately are you wanting to say about the connection between her fractured relationship with her mother and her ability to bring her mother's assailant to justice?
Because the gift comes after her mother is put into the coma, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that like the connective tissue between all of those things, and maybe you know the answer already, but I'm curious to know, because that would be my biggest question on this. Is it feels in the pitch of it, it feels like sort of a bunch of separate things happening, but I want to know what the bigger picture concept of it happening is, and why specifically this at this specific time, and how does the answer to that question ultimately influence the result.
And then I'm also curious, does the character have the 5 brothers in the script?
No, she has a little sister and a little brother, and they're both, skeptical of her, and they criticize her. But basically there's a time crunch in this, because there's a time where the doctor is demanding, are you going to take your wife off life support? So that's, I think, partially what influences this girl to develop ESP.
Because I was intrigued by, and it's funny because it's similar to what I was saying to Stephanie about potentially using her own experience more it's like we're inspired by our own experiences, but also sometimes just using something directly from our own experiences is the best. And obviously I haven't read the script, but I just started thinking when you were talking about your 5 brothers and the male dominant energy in your childhood, like, the ESP and using her intuition and going inward to solve something is very inherently female. And I wonder if it might be interesting to juxtapose that with the much more kind of blunt force exterior way that 5 brothers might try to go about solving their mother's attack. I don't know. There was something, again, obviously I haven't read the script. Yeah. Maybe it's perfect as it is with the 2 younger siblings, but there was something interesting about the male female energy and how we solve problems and how we heal as a family that just intrigued me.
Building on that a little bit, like my head in some ways goes to like, does she actually have ESP? Is the ESP like if the story is being told subjectively from her point of view, like is this idea of a superpower potentially ultimately unearthed some kind of coping mechanism? Like she's convinced herself that again, I'm like, I haven't read the script. I have no idea where your story goes, but to ground it back to like,
sort of like Relic. Did you see Relic? That movie that came out this year?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
well, I don't want to spoil it. Yeah, but it's cool because it uses horror as a metaphor for a medical condition.
Yeah.
And so there is maybe something about like trauma and
this relationship with her mother that's broken and the trauma her mother's been through, that she ultimately is convinced that she can do something more for her than what she ultimately what is the truth of her quote unquote superpower? Like, is it a superpower, or is it just something that is human that she's convinced herself is a superpower? And is that revealed to her in some way at some point in the story? There are ways to kind of like really start to unpack like what is, and I think that goes back to Julia's initial question, which is what is the core reason to tell this story in this way? How is this superpower and this idea of her finding her mother's assailant, how is that connecting back to the humanity of it and the very like human condition of her relationship with her mother and what her own experience as a daughter was? And so in answering those questions, I think then you can start to tease out the reality or non-reality of these superpowers and what they mean, and again, what they speak to thematically.
And again, obviously we haven't read the script.
Maybe it's like I don't want to be prescriptive, right. Which is why I'm saying like you need to I think figuring out the answer to that core question will then speak to how to ultimately play it out, at script level.
Well, I have two particular instances where the first instance, she proves to herself that she does have a gift because she sees something and then reads later in the news that this thing happened. And then the next thing is when she really gets an experience to save someone. And that's when one of the teenagers at her school is going to do the choking game and she prevents it. So she prevents that person from actually killing themselves from choking. So then those two incidents line up, and then she starts to do more and more things that are more and more risky towards the eventual finding of this gangster and, his cohorts, the mugger, and everyone that she comes up against, which is a lot of testosterone. There's a lot of guys there, and I think that was how I just opposed it, was having these very high level major criminal players be the opposite, opposing figures for
Energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also really like the ticking clock.
Yeah.
I'm always wanting to find ticking clocks because
Yeah.
they are the most powerful engines a script can have. Because everything else, like a ticking clock automatically raises the stakes of everything else in the script, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
And really hard to find a good one. And obviously your mother, like being in a coma and having to stay on life support or not, is an amazing ticking clock.
Alicia, you're lucky in that you got great notes, and time is the enemy. So we won't have time to give you a twist, but gave you a lot of food for thought. So
Great.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Who's our fourth? Who's our last?
Hi,
You're on.
I'm Barry Lennox, and I'm actually based out in New Zealand. So I listened to Larry's talk at Script to Screen New Zealand a few days ago, so this is very exciting to be on here now. Should I get started?
Yes. The time is yours.
Yep. So Alana and I, can you hear me?
It's kind of breaking up.
Oh, yes, you can hear me. Okay, great. I wasn't sure. Couldn't hear everyone else. Yes, so I have a writing partner based in New Zealand called Lana, and we are having a conversation about our lives. So when I was in high school, my dad moved to a different city, and I moved in with a different family, one of my best friend's families. And when she was in high school, she had a parent in a care home because her parents were both dealing with sickness. And so we came together through these experiences and came up with Luke's Guide to the Goodman Girls, which is a half-hour family comedy about a guy who goes through the similar feeling of being a fish out of water that we both had over this time. And he is a guy's guy who finds himself in the first episode at a period party. He is very interested in playing for the NHL. And so when his dad gets offered a job in Syria, he moves in with his godparents to pursue his dream of playing for the NHL. But there's just one little catch, and that's their 8 daughters. And none of the 8 daughters want him to be there, especially Esty, who is being forced out of her room by Luke and has to share now with one of her sisters, and she also has to share classes with him. So she gets her sisters involved in Operation Get Rid of Luke, and they are sabotaging him every step of the way, stealing his skates, help stop him on the ice and on the hockey field. And so basically,
we're
You're kind of
losing you.
Hold on, we're losing you a little bit.
We're losing you.
family and keep up. And
What a shame.
he sends,
Can you hear us?
and this
I don't think she can.
child posters.
I feel bad. And she's pitching her heart out.
Bari, can you hear
his
us?
dad, who lived on our. Can you hear me?
No, we lost
We
you.
lost you for like.
oh,
Oh, it's Bari. Oh, she's gone.
8,000 miles away.
Pretty amazing that
She's pitching us
From New
8,000
Zealand.
miles away. Oh
All
my
right,
God.
you know,
Her connection was like great this whole time.
yeah, yeah.
I know. I hope she can come back, but with our remaining time, I'm going to go back to Stephanie. Stephanie, have you had time to think?
I have.
Oh, Bari's back.
hello.
Go. Let her go.
Okay, yeah, we lost you halfway through.
Hello.
We
Hi.
lost you around, you were saying that the 8 sisters were trying to sabotage Operation Get Rid of Luke, sabotage him, and then you totally broke up.
Oh, did I? Oh, okay. I can
sorry.
I will continue the pitch. Yeah, so basically, did you hear about a bit about Esty or no?
No.
Okay. So particularly Esty, who is the same age as Luke, and she has been forced out of her room.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I
And
heard
she's
that
forced to share with one of her sisters. And so she has it out for Luke throughout the series, and she's our main antagonist. Especially because Luke is getting a bit romantically close with her best friend, and they have to share classes together. And so she is determined that she is going to sabotage Luke in his NHL career, and trying to make the high school team and at home. And so steals his skates, she'll change his alarms, and drags her sisters into this operation. Luke, on the other hand, he wants to stay with the family. He's never really had a family because he grew up on archaeological dig sites with his dad, and his dad's more interested in bones than he is in him. And his mom has Alzheimer's, and it's been early onset Alzheimer's, and it's been in a care home. And so throughout the series, he sends vlogs to his mom. It's his Luke's guide to the Goodman girls is his guide to these girls that he doesn't understand.
Right.
And the family, this is a chance for him to live close to his mom's care home and get to establish a relationship with her again.
Okay, because of time, quick takes. Gio and Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest question for you that I'm not quite getting from the pitch is who the audience is, and what, like, the sort of crass version of my question is, like, what network do you see this on? Where do you see this landing? Because there's a version of
Is
it
it like
that
YA?
is it a
or
YA
is
Disney show, or is it something that's a bit more of like you know, like
Edgy.
or like a WB drama kind of thing, like a Greg Berlanti, like a Riverdale kind of thing. Like I'm not quite sensing which lane it wants to be in, and I think especially with half-hour television,
I will say what I was getting were some, I don't know if you guys had TGIF in New Zealand,
just
like Step by Step and
Yeah.
Full House and Family Matters. Like, you were making me nostalgic for those TV shows that I watched as a kid that were adult. They were like because I feel like so much content for kids today is so kiddie and juvenile. And like when we were watching shows that were about like adult problems and family problems and teenagers.
Right.
And so I love that idea, and I feel nostalgic for that. I don't know if that was like what you were going for, but that was kind of the vibe I was getting.
Yeah, I think we're looking at it to be that kind of that deeper heart, but definitely keeping it light, family comedy sense. So it would be much more of a children friendly type show.
Like a whole family can sit and watch it.
Yeah,
together.
like a family type. Yeah.
And does
while still having some of these
ultimately, like, do they ultimately come together? Is that like the goal,
Yeah.
or do you not?
Season 6.
No, yeah, I think the goal is that the Goodmans are the family that Luke's never had, and
Right.
that they also need him, and throughout all their trouble.
As much as I agree with Julia about having nostalgia for those kind of like broader network shows of our youth, I also don't know that that's the.
I think Disney Plus would very much be
for sure.
making that kind of.
I guess
show.
what I'm saying is that, like, you have to think about where the potential landing places are for something like this. And I think your pitch can be a bit more targeted to what the differing audiences would be if this landed at Disney versus if this landed at Netflix versus if this landed at Amazon versus if this landed at HBO.
You sort of have to know,
Max,
like,
you know?
we were just pitching a project that we were just pitching a project to a couple different companies, and we tailored the pitch based on where the company was. And I think that's really smart. And I was definitely getting the vibes of what you're saying the show is, but I think Jordan's right that in your pitch, you may just want to be a little more explicit about that.
There are also,
like I was getting that from you, but you may just want to.
There are also networks. Networks still exist. Like I forget about them because you know what I mean? It's like all networks still are real and exist. So, you know, there are network shows that do it, but it's just, you know, there's very particular, like all these places are so much more targeted now in the way that they operate. So I think just thinking about where you ultimately want this to land and finessing the pitch into that.
And one last thing is I was picturing 8 episodes, like one for each of the sisters, where he like does a vlog for his mom about each of them. I don't know if that was, oh no, what just happened? Sorry.
It's just Zoom.
Anyway, I don't know if that was something you were thinking about, but I thought that could be like a really cute hook to bring it together.
Well, I hope that helped. And thank you for being here from New Zealand. That's fantastic. And thanks for the kind words.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It was awesome. These were all amazing.
Bring us home. You're our last person.
Okay, I don't even know how great this is. Oprah, I'm sorry. I only had 10 minutes. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say 2 ideas. I just want to know people's thoughts on them.
Yeah.
So one is very grounded in my actual life, and it's at the beginning of each school year, the campus manager sends out a request to all the people that are interested to ask any of the tough questions about how the Bible relates to what they're doing in their regular life. And then each episode, she kind of takes a question, relates it back to a parable, and then is able to tell the anthology that way. And then my second side of it is pretty similar, but it makes it so that I don't have to focus too much on those people. It's a youth radio host that has a call-in show that's basically doing the same concept of telling these stories, and they're able to get that call-in show, and you see a little bit of thread of their life and the struggles that they're going through and how each episode like helps them, that they're telling to actually help other people actually helps that person in their life. So I don't know if Oprah is going to buy that.
well, I think
no idea.
I think whichever one you ultimately go with, the trick is to build out that arc, right?
Yeah.
Like, tell me the story of that person. What is their history, and what is the problem that they're facing right now in the present moment? That ultimately, these particular stories, as we see them, are helping them sort of move through their own individual issues. I think what it is you need that story in itself needs to be strong enough and deep enough and have enough history and context to support a season, right? Yeah. So I think that's if you're going to do that, which makes it more saleable. Like, listen,
I don't love it, but I understand the feedback, and it
makes it more saleable. I'm not saying it's right.
It also doesn't. It also, like, I probably shouldn't say this, but too, it's like it's one thing pitching something, and then the reality of actually like developing it in a room with writers. Like it needs to feel whole enough that they'll buy it, and then like once you hire a writer's room, you know, it like. There may be someone who comes up with like the exact, do you know what I mean? It's like, you need to have the idea, even if you don't 100% love it, nobody's going to be like, that's it. You can't develop further or come up with a new idea or whatever.
Also, if you're really wed to the idea of doing it as an anthology, do that, but you're going to have to fully write out at least 2 or 3 episodes so that then you can say, I'm doing this anthology. Here's what I want to do. Here are 3 written episodes that are done and ready to be shot. Because I think like you won't be able to you certainly wouldn't be able to sell an anthology off a pitch unless you attach very high level talent and a whole bunch of stuff and are able to sell it that way, right? Yes. And you wouldn't be able to even sell it off of having written out 1 pilot episodes. I think you would need to have multiple episodes to be able to say, here is the work and here is a like full demonstration of what the work will be. Yeah. It's impossible to deny.
And sometimes testing, like coming up with this other idea and being like, I don't love it, just makes you more committed to your original idea.
Exactly. I'm just saying there's a lot of work.
Which is not a bad thing.
There would be a lot of work involved in trying to get an anthology series like that made just on that's all.
Yeah. I have 8 logos.
And I believe in you to do it. I believe in you to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for all the
that's just the reality of it. And so
no.
To just have the reality of it.
The reality is important. That matters.
Julia, Jordan, thank you for bringing reality.
This was so fun.
Thank you.
Oh, I so enjoyed having you.
You're both terrific. Let's do it again.
Thank you so much.
We would love to.
We'll come up with better twists next time.
Yeah,
These
we'll
pitches were too good.
I'll get my twist machine.
We'll do a part 2. Thank you so much for the time this afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
This
you
was
so
awesome.
much, everyone. Be safe. Take care.